Hello lettering friends, I'm Sarah from Ensign Insights, and in this video I'm going to review the Cedar Markers Dual Brush Pens. Since they look a lot like Tombow Dual Brush Pens, I will compare the two so we can see if these might be an alternative or not. Thank you for clicking to watch this video and for subscribing to my channel. By the way, Cedar Markers did send these brush pens to me. This isn't a sponsored video, but I always want you to know when I didn't purchase the pens myself. These pens come in a flat cardboard box with magnets on the top to keep it closed. It's very unique, and though I like it, it's not the most secure because it is just magnets. If I dropped it, it probably would open and pens would fly everywhere. On the back, it explains a little more about the pens. They are water-based and acid-free. I like the little window on the front so the rainbow gradient shows through. There are 21 pens total, 20 different colors, and a blender brush pen. Tombow has one of these too, and I know a lot of people who really like using them. I basically never use mine, so I already know I won't be using this. Also, I think you might have noticed it was difficult to get the cap off. They seem to cap on really tight. I know that's a picky little detail, but it's kind of annoying to open tight caps. Now pulling out my Tombow, let's see how they compare. When I shared these on Instagram, the most common question I got was how they compared to Tombow. They just look so similar. You can see that they're the same size even. The lids are different and the Tombow has a black body instead of gray, but the real question is how the brush nibs compare. So let's open these up and lay them side by side. The length is the same. The fine tip looks the same. The first thing I notice is that Tombow has a more rounded nib. Cedar Markers is very pointy and almost sharp. So they're definitely not identical. Now let's see how that affects the lettering. Tombow has a great nib. Because it's so long, it can be hard to control without a lot of practice, but the nib itself is good quality. It doesn't flop around like some pens. It holds its shape well. With the Cedar marker, it's a lot more flexible than the Tombow. It is really bouncy, which I love. I want my brush nib to bounce back. But because the tip is so skinny and soft, it does take a lot of concentration to get consistent upstrokes. If you don't like soft brush pens, you probably won't like these. I just love the bounce though. I do notice that the color isn't as vibrant as Tombow, which probably means they aren't as inky. With the basic strokes, I don't know if you can tell, but Tombow feels more sturdy. I wouldn't call them a hard nib, but it is definitely more firm than Cedar Markers. With Cedar Markers, like I said, it's a little harder to get the consistent strokes because it's a little more flimsy. And maybe in this word, hey, you can see that. I can't show you what the muscles in my hand are doing, but I feel like with Tombow, I don't have to work as hard to get it consistent. With Cedar Markers, I really love that bounce. I can't stop talking about that, but I do feel like I have to work a little bit harder to get the consistent thin upstrokes. So like I said, they are soft and bouncy. If you like a soft brush pen, you will probably like them, but it does take a little more control than you might be used to with other markers. I really love the bouncy pens like Marvy color in brush markers, so I decided to pull them out and see how they compare. I would say it probably has a similar bounce, but the Marvy feels more sturdy. I still like the Marvy better. The nib looks very different, but the Marvy coloring is deceiving because it's a little shorter, but it's so flexible. Next, I wanted to compare the Artist Loft Dual Tip Brush Pen because it's another one that is really similar to Tombow. Looking at all of the brush nibs together, Tombow and Artist Loft look the same, and Cedar Markers is the only one that is that skinny, pointy nib. When I use the Artist Loft, I feel it's more sturdy than Cedar Markers, but it is slightly more flexible than Tombow. With some basic strokes, you can see the upstrokes are easier to control than the Cedar Markers. It mostly feels like a Tombow. So then to compare the fine tips, having fine tips in the same color as the brush nib is my favorite part of these pens. I find that I use the fine tip of my Tombow maybe even more than the brush nib. You can see that even though they look the same size, the Cedar markers are slightly thicker of a point, and Artist Loft is basically the same as Tombow. Next, I tested these on my worksheets for large brush pens to see how they would do. I keep saying it, but I really do enjoy that flexible bounce of the nib. These worksheets are from my Handlettering for Beginners workbook with everything I wish I knew when I started lettering. You can find them through the link in the description below. As you can see, you can get a really good contrast in stroke thickness with that really thick downstroke and thin upstroke. Because it's really soft, it does take some control to get a really hairline upstroke, but the nib is skinny enough that if you have a light hand, you can get it really thin. I probably wouldn't use it for much smaller lettering because it is a little flimsy. And as for the question of it being an alternative to Tombow, I would say no, it's not similar enough to be an alternative. I think Artist Loft is still probably the most similar, so it's kind of an alternative. I thought these would be more similar, but Cedar markers brush nib is very different. Maybe you would like this one better, maybe you would like Tombow better. I think that comes down to personal preference. I don't think it's a bad brush nib, but I wouldn't tell someone to start with these. It's more for someone who already has the muscle memory of thick downstrokes and thin upstrokes, and someone who likes a soft, flexible nib. And I do like the fine tips just as much as I like other fine tips. There really is not a huge difference with these. These faux calligraphy worksheets that I am using here are from my SKILLSHARE class about faux calligraphy and creating your own unique styles. I will link to that below. And now to show you all of the colors together. I like most of these color options. I do wish they came in smaller sets with maybe different color choices, but overall these are good colors. I like that there are a few unique colors that don't come in every pack, like the golden yellow and the teal and some of the pinks. I really like the bright pink. I always need a set of brush pens that has a pink in it. Of course, you probably want all of the colors, and the price for the whole set isn't too expensive. It's cheaper than buying 21 Tombows, but Tombow has packs of 10 that can be cheaper if you get them with a coupon. If you're at Michael's or Hobby Lobby, or if you get it on Amazon, it would be cheaper. I like being able to get a few markers for a cheaper price to see if I like them first before getting the whole pack. And also, these only come in the 20 colors, whereas Tombow has now over 100 colors. So that would be something too. If you are actually wanting to invest in all of the colors, then you would want to go with Tombow. If you're okay with just 20 colors, then the Cedar markers is an okay option. If you think that these markers are going to be a good fit for you, they are linked below so you can check them out for yourselves. I've only been using these for a couple weeks, so I don't know how quickly they will fray. Because they're so flimsy, I'm assuming they won't last for a really long time, but a few weeks is better than some of my other brush pens. And this last test is the blending test. I don't blend my pens on the paper because I love the look of blending on watercolor paper, but I don't want to use my brush pens on watercolor paper and fray them. So instead, I use them as watercolor with my water brush. This rainbow blend is something I do with all of my brush pens. I will link to the video where I compared all of them if you're interested to see that. They do a good job blending because they are water-based. However, this was definitely a more pastel look than some of my other brush pens, especially my Tombow brush pens. So this just means I was right when I said earlier that I thought Cedar markers weren't as vibrant as Tombow. And maybe you like them a little more pastel, but you could also get the pastel Tombow brush pens. I hope this answered all of your questions about these brush pens. Let me know if you have any other questions. Remember, all the links I mentioned are in the description box. Thank you so much for being here and for subscribing. I will see you next time.